Welcome to the No Excuses MMA Vivisection, and I'm starting it that way. I also don't know why I keep throwing my hands in the air. I'm trying to stop do that, but I'm always excited. I'm starting it off as the No Excuses MMA Vivisection because I have no excuse for this show being 20 minutes, 30 minutes late. I sat down to review a little more footage because I was running a little late today, and then I just started talking to Connor about movies for a while. We were talking about neo-Western noir and Connor's upcoming movie podcast, which he's starting with his girlfriend, and I am bartering my way into getting various guest spots on to tell him that he's a foolish, uncultured oaf. So
yes, that's what I need.
Yes. So anyway, we are here to talk about UFC Brasilia, and it's not like we delayed this because UFC Brasilia is not a fun card. It is honestly a top to bottom, very fun card, and it's going to be a really interesting, I think, tipping point in Chris Cyborg's career because it sounds like both for her and the UFC, this card is a not to be vulgar, but a shit or get off the pot moment where she either wins big and draws enough eyes that the UFC really works hard to convince a top 5, top 10 bantamweight to go up and face her at 140, or the UFC just sends her back to Invicta and says, okay, we tried it. It didn't work. You're not valuable enough and you don't want to fight at 140 anymore.
I don't know why they don't just have her fight at 145 and just bring like you don't even have to have a division. Cyborg draws.
Well, we don't know that she does. That's the thing.
I have to assume so. Compared to any other female fighters in the world, there aren't really many more that have more sort of magnetic appeal that I can think of.
I think their thing is sort of if she doesn't draw enough to make women at 135 be like, oh, this is a big fight that I should take the chance on.
True, and you got to have quite a bit of draw for that to become a tempting proposition because dangerous and unpopular is not a good way to be.
Yeah, if she doesn't draw to that extent, then the UFC's not interested long term. They don't want to build around her. They don't want to prop her up at 145, and that's why things are happening at 140. Everybody's like, oh, I don't know why this has to happen at 140. It's because it's a lure. It's a lure to get somebody like Holly Holm or even Kat Zingano to say, I'll take a stab at it. The UFC can make
How many of those women does Cyborg destroy before even her being at 140 isn't enough of a reason for them to fight her?
It would all be about the money. It would be if they could make one of those a big enough attraction that they can say, we can pay you 5 times what you'd normally get to take this fight, then
I'm sure someone would pay to watch Rousey Cyborg or Holmes Cyborg or Tate Cyborg even.
Yeah, but I'm sure they have to get those fights to happen, and I think this is the shit or get off the pot moment where she either shows the UFC she has enough value for them to work on those fights seriously, or they just say, okay, whatever, we're done.
Yep.
So to me, it's a very fascinating storyline card in that way. Like, this is a meaningful fight at the top, even if it's against somebody that Cyborg should beat.
I agree.
At that point, it's a big card, so we're going to try and march our way through it. We never do. We never quite manage to, but we're going to try and jump in at the bottom with Glyco Franca versus Gregor Gillespie. Talk about this fight.
Gregor Gillespie making his UFC debut, former NCAA champion, I think, number 1 NCAA wrestler in the world at one point. And Glyco Franca, pretty promising prospect. Gillespie, obviously not an MMA native. That's his disadvantage here. Franca's taking this fight on short notice, and so there's a bit of a disadvantage for him, especially because, as we were noting before the show began, he is a fairly big fighter for this division, so we don't really know how he might perform on short notice, having to cut a lot of weight at once. I'm going to go ahead and go with Gregor Gillespie because I think he has a very focused style, and personally I'm starting to feel more and more like specialization with caveats is the way to go for a young prospect to succeed. I think we see a lot of fighters like the Nicholas Dalby types who are maybe not super athletic. We were talking about that last week, but also just are kind of okay everywhere, not super powerful on the feet, good timing on takedowns, but not a great grappler. They just can kind of do a little bit of everything, and they run into problems against fighters who can. It's easier to defend everything than it is to make anything happen. You know what I mean? It's much easier to step back and avoid a punch than it is to learn to step in and punch somebody without them stepping back first. It's much easier to pull your arm out of an armbar than it is to get yourself into an airtight armbar position. And so for fighters, when they run into somebody who's good enough defensively in all the other areas and really good in one area, it overwhelms them. And I think Glyco Franca's solid and well-rounded, but Gregor Gillespie is a phenomenal wrestler. He has not had any trouble so far putting that to use in his MMA career, and he's really showing some good promise on the ground as a submission grappler as well. So I'm going to go with Gregor Gillespie, and I can't remember. I try to be consistent with my Sherdog picks. I went with unanimous decision.
I am banking. I am unfortunately of the banking, I think, on the prototypical submission prospect loss for Gillespie here. And this is weird for me because this is a guy I think could be a top 5 fighter. But a big thing here is honestly size. Gillespie's 5'9", and Franca is 6'2". That's a 5-inch disparity in size. And especially like watching Gillespie's last fight on the regionals against Sydney Outlaw, somebody who was actually an inch shorter than him but had that real fire plug massive build. Gillespie had a lot of trouble keeping control of a fighter that big and powerful in a way that he doesn't normally have, and that's partially because he wants to be a very aggressive ground grappler. So even if he gets takedowns, even if he gets dominant positions, like he gave them up again and again against Outlaw just because Outlaw was too big. He was too big and strong for Gillespie to mount and then try and, the moment he would start throwing punches, Outlaw would just roll him. And the moment he got back control, Outlaw would just turn into his guard. And it was... I think Gillespie's a little too aggressive in those areas, maybe for his own good. I think it's a good style down the road. It'll serve him well. That aggression's great for him in the long term. But Franca's really good at scrambling and at getting submission positions while scrambling. And given that size disparity, I think Gillespie's going to tangle up and find himself suddenly back-mounted and getting choked. And eventually, probably this is the kind of thing that might force him to featherweight, where I think he'd be a much more natural fit and a really elite potential contender down the road.
What was his wrestling weight, do you know?
149.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
a lot of wrestlers find it easier to make weight for MMA than in wrestling because the fights are so spread out.
Yeah, and like I say, he's 5'9" at lightweight, and he's not built like a brick shithouse. It's not the case. He doesn't even have that Conor McGregor build of like huge long arms and a small torso. He's just got kind of a normal featherweight build. And in that fight against Outlaw, I was surprised to see Outlaw. When I actually looked at the stats, Outlaw was an inch shorter than him. It's like he looks like a division smaller working against this guy. So I think it's just a case of Gillespie long-term maybe not being a true lightweight. But he is such a dogged, tough, constant wrestler that if Franca can't take him out early, Gillespie's going to be there working him over for every minute of this fight.
Yeah.
Odds on this, Glyco Franca is the slight favorite, -127 to -140. Gregor Gillespie +119 to +105. It's a tough one. I don't know.
That's fine, I think. You got a newcomer. It's as long as they're relatively close, I'm fine with the odds on this fight.
Yeah, it's not a fight I would bet on. The size disparity, the short notice, there are too many X factors. Um, and Gillespie's got a sort of sky's the limit potential, but Franca's the more experienced, bigger, more well-rounded fighter.
You might be able to bet on it distance over 2.5 rounds.
Yeah, that does not look like a good bet to me. All right, that brings us to the second bout on the card, a welterweight bout, Vicente Luque versus Hector Urbina. And frankly, this doesn't seem like that hard a fight to pick for me. Urbina does not have good takedown defense really at all. Luque is not the world's greatest wrestler, but he's a good, solid athlete who is decent at mixing his shots into his striking. He stays at range well. He protects himself reasonably all right. He's fast enough at least to get out of the way. I think Luke's just too good of an athlete for Urbina to make that up, and to Urbina doesn't have any clear skill advantage to take, and he doesn't have the athletic advantage, and Luke's got a big grappling skill advantage and a wrestling advantage, so I got to go with Luke here.
Yeah, I'll keep this one short. I'm pretty much with you there. Urbina, I don't think is just not particularly good. His game doesn't really fit together all that well. He has one thing he does pretty well, and it's find front headlock chokes and submissions and scrambles. And, you know, it's not like I don't think Luque is going to be going for a lot of shot takedowns and giving him that opportunity. And Luque is, like you said, a better submission grappler anyway, a little smoother on the feet. When you go into a fight with Vicente Luque and you are like markedly less well put together, there are some problems because Luque certainly has a bit of clunkiness to his game. But I think here Luque's game, it's just a lot more fluid. So I'm going with Luque by submission.
Yeah. Odds on this fight are Urbina at plus 358 down to plus 300. Luque minus 409 to minus 525. I honestly have no problem with those odds. I think Luke's been getting a lot better lately, and Urbina just does not seem like the right caliber of fighter for this level of competition.
Yeah, I mean, I would complain about putting such heavy odds in the favor of a guy like Vicente Luque, but also, like, I just don't see Urbina winning, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, Urbina is the kind of guy who has literally lost to every decent step up in competition he's taken.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see, like, this just feels like another one of those fights. That brings us to the main Fight Pass prelim. Alan Patrick, Stevie Ray. Really looking forward to this fight. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We got Stevie Ray, who is a very solid. We talked about the beautiful simplicity of Gabriel Benitez's style on last week's show. He kind of has some of that going on. He doesn't do a lot, but there's a lot of nuance to what he does. You know, he's very reliant on his left hand, but he has good timing. His footwork nicely sets it up. He knows how to go in for the kill when he has someone hurt. That is for damn sure. I think he's won all 3 of his 3 UFC bouts now by knockout. Oh, he didn't knock out Michel Lebu, but he knocked out the other 2 guys he fought. Both of those very impressive. And the fight with Lebu I thought was fairly impressive as well. I do wonder what Stevie Ray looks like against a good wrestler, though. That's my big question mark here, because he hasn't really fought any very good wrestlers in the UFC. In fact, none. I mean, the best wrestler he's fought is Marcin Bandel, and that's not a great wrestler, you know? And I think 5 of his 6 losses are, I guess it's 4 of his 5 losses are submissions. And I think the one that wasn't a submission, he was out-grappled by Kurt Warburton, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to wonder, my assumption would be that his wrestling's gotten better working at TriStar and all of that, but I also would have said the same thing about Joseph Duffy. And Joseph Duffy's wrestling looked pretty abysmal against Dustin Poirier. So I don't know. And with that in mind, I think Alan Patrick is a well-rounded enough fighter to press that advantage. The question is whether Alan Patrick can actually press the advantage, because he just doesn't fight smart a lot of the time. Not that he has never fought smart. He often makes good tactical decisions, but for some reason, he comes out in a lot of fights and just starts immediately attacking his opponent in their area of expertise. I'm going to hope that having gained a little experience, he won't do that. I'm going to pick Patrick just because I have no idea what Ray looks like against a solid grappler and a strong athletic wrestler. But there is a very strong chance that Patrick comes out and tries 2-box with Stevie Ray and just gets knocked the hell out. And it'll be a cold shot, Zane. I'm going to make as many Stevie Ray Vaughan references as I can during the fight, because the last 2 times I've done that, nobody has gotten them. So
yeah, that's because nobody listens to Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Come on now. Come on.
But
did you know that Stevie Ray is the UK's pride and joy?
So fucking done. I am gonna pick Stevie Ray. I've seen some of these fights where Ray has lost, and where he's had to wrestle and where he's been out grappled. And honestly, I think it's like his grappling and wrestling games have been a long, long work in progress. Like, I don't think the thing I would say about him is that he's never been actually bad at it. It's just that he was always more aggressive than he was good.
Like Matt Brown, maybe.
Yeah, like Matt Brown. And it's also part of the reason why, as he's gone on, even when he's lost submissions, it's become later and later in fights. Like, early on, he was losing right in round 1 by armbar to Dan, whoever the hell that is. Lost by rear naked choke late in round 1 to Nico Musoke. And then it's, Assam Ni, I'm going to say, in round 2. Then Kurt Warburton, it was a decision. And then Buckinger was a round 4 submission. And it's just like, it's been this slow, steady learning curve for him to get better and better. And I think, honestly, he's become a pretty well-rounded wrestler. Like, he's not a bad wrestler or grappler, and he's still a very willing one at this point in his career. And I cannot trust Alan Patrick to win a fight. Like, he almost lost to Damian Brown. Damian Brown is like the super cut rate Stevie Ray in terms of style. Like, they have a very similar put togetherness of their game, where like Damian Brown's a very willing wrestler and grappler, often gets extremely badly out wrestled and grappled, but he's very willing to engage, and a sneaky hard puncher despite being slower than dirt. And Ray is not slower than dirt and is not a bad wrestler or grappler, and does not easily get out wrestled and grappled at this stage in his career. And my biggest problem, my biggest fear is that Ray, when he doesn't have to take the fight to his opponent, like, he's kind of got Gegard Mousasi syndrome, where when he doesn't have to do more to win, he'll just kind of coast out. And that can lead to him, like, he lets fighters hang around with him. That was the big thing about him.
Couple guys on this card like that. Stevie Ray, and we'll look at Paul Felder later, and Mike De La Torre as well. A lot of guys who kind of let their opponents figure them out if they're not, presenting themselves for the finish.
And that was a big problem in that Mikel Lebu fight. Like, he didn't look bad in that fight, but he actually kind of got stung a couple times by Lebu late, because he just let Lebu hang out with him. And it's like, you're way faster and you hit way harder than this dude. Why are you just hanging out and letting him take whatever time he wants to be in the cage with you? It doesn't make sense.
Alan Patrick is probably not going to do that, though.
Yeah,
like,
Alan Patrick does not figure people out.
Going to come after Steve. Yeah, I mean, we got Alan Patrick. Erick Silva's up next, but it's important to remember that Alan Patrick trains still out of the same gym that Erick Silva began his career out of. And Erick Silva didn't change one whit over the course of his entire career until he moved to Kings. And by that point, I think he was already declining. So I don't know if we can expect to see Alan Patrick making drastic changes in style or strategy.
So I'm going to pick Stevie Ray just because I think that Patrick will come after him in a way that actually benefits him and is not going to be nearly consistent enough challenging him in places where Stevie Ray might struggle.
You may be right.
So odds on this, Ray is in fact the favorite, minus 162 to minus 190, it looks like. Alan Patrick, the underdog, plus 150 to plus 135. I might say Patrick is worth a chance underdog bet, but those are pretty short odds, and Patrick is not trustable at all.
It's not quite. Even as someone who picked him, like I'm basically just sticking to my guns at this point because you made a good case for Stevie Ray. I don't. Yeah. I mean, those odds they seem okay to me. They're within reason.
Yeah, it's just Patrick is so untrustworthy. He is. And Ray is trustworthy. The question is just whether or not, if somebody presses him, how hard is he going to fight?
Yeah.
That's the real question. That brings us to our Fox Sports 1 prelims, Erick Silva versus Luan Chagas. And, man, this is
this is a strange fight.
This is a strange fight because it is very much a continuing tales of Erick Silva's decline. Like, remember when Gray Maynard fought who's his last opponent?
Fernando Bruno.
And it was just like, I had to pick Maynard because it's like, this is going to be absolutely the worst dude that Gray Maynard has ever lost to if he loses to Fernando Bruno by a mile. That's very much still the case here for Erick Silva with Luan Chagas. And Luan Chagas is not that bad, but Luan Chagas would definitely be the worst loss of Erick Silva's career if Erick Silva loses.
Yeah, unlike Bruno, I think, however, he's got a better stylistic edge over Silva. Like, Bruno was not a very good striker who would have had to wrestle with Gray Maynard, and I kind of feel like a fool for having picked him in that fight. Chagas, like Erick Silva's the counter wrestler who beats up grapplers, and that's not Luan Chagas. He's like a rangy kicker. He's a lot closer to Nordine Taleb than he is to, I don't know,
Dong Young Kim, but Dong Young Kim was full dong, wild dong.
He was full dong in that fight. He's a lot closer to Nordine Taleb than he is to Josh Koscheck. Let's say that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I actually, I'm going to pick Luan Chagas here. I think Erick Silva's problems they're just more and more apparent over time, and I don't know how much it matters who he fights at this point. As long as the guy he's fighting is a good athlete who has ways to finish, I don't know how much it matters who it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't trust Erick Silva to be there for long stretches. We can't trust him to win after round one. And we can't trust him anymore we can't trust him anymore to just easily blitz people because people know. They know what to expect. They know what's coming. And he may be a little slower than he used to be.
I think he definitely is.
Yeah. If he's a little slower, a little less tough, and still prone to gassing out, Chagas is nobody's technical marvel. He's going to rush in on Silva in a way that could leave him very open for a takedown. But Erick Silva is nobody's technical marvel either. Like, Erick Silva either has those dynamic moments where he just changes the whole scope of the fight, or he doesn't. And Chagas, I was pretty impressed with how well he was able to keep range and to understand that after he rushed in to get back out and reset and to throw multiple strikes and not just be this funky one-off striker. And I think he's improving. He's young. He seems to have an eye for how to develop at a higher level. So I'm going to pick him to make another jump forward, to pick up a big name, and to probably, unfortunately, cheat us out of Erick Silva versus Brandon Thatch, which is the fight that we were supposed to be getting and we should be getting.
Mm-hmm. I keep thinking there's applause happening in the background, but it's clearly, once I hear it, it's just the sound of a dog shaking its head.
Yeah, she's got floppy ears.
Sergio Moraes, which, by the way, you have infected me with a fondness for Sergio Moraes that I did not feel before we began talking about him on this show. But now every time I watch him fight, I'm like, it's Zane's guy. Come on, Zane's guy. You know?
He's such a funky, crazy weirdo.
Sergio Moraes is like an older, less athletic Erick Silva, but one who actually learns from his experiences. Yeah. So, and that's a pretty good way to be, like being fairly athletic, being strong, having a really venomous submission game, and like knowing when you need to press, when you need to pull back, that kind of stuff. That's a much bigger boon than most people think. And I was really impressed with the way Luan Chagas dealt with him. And maybe Erick Perez is slightly a better striker than Sergio Moraes, like not by much, to be honest. And that's not actually that's not a great thing to say, because Sergio Moraes is not a good striker. But Erick Silva is probably a little better than him and a little more athletic, but he doesn't learn from his experiences. He doesn't seem capable of being a crafty fighter as he gets older. And it was the craftiness that saved Moraes in that fight. It was the fact that he was like, all right, I'm being picked apart by kicks. He stayed really calm when he got hurt. He came out in the second round and he pressured the hell out of Luan Chagas because he knew he couldn't kick going backwards. And every time he gave him space, he got kicked, and he was like, all right, up the pressure. I'm coming after him again, and I'm going to pull him down to the ground and back him into the fence. And Erick Silva's not really shown the ability to do that consistently in many fights. And it's more worrying for him because now in 3 of his last 4 losses, he's been knocked out. So we've got him still coming up against this higher level of competition, falling short, only really ever in the UFC having beaten washed up or not very good fighters. And every time he steps up in competition, we realize that he just doesn't have that much of a game. I agree that Luan Chagas would be the worst fighter he's lost to, but Chagas is long. He's got a good kicking game. He's definitely very tough. And I assume his stamina will be better in this fight than it was against Barao because he took that fight on very short notice. So, and again, it's not that hard to look like your stamina is serviceable against Erick Silva, who really can't fight more than a round at a certain pace. So I'm going with Luan Chagas as well. I guess I should have learned my lesson from the Fernando Bruno Gray Maynard fight. I picked Bruno there, but I'm going for the continued decline yet again.
Yeah, well, and Chagas, for to his credit, he has beach muscles. He does gas, but he has power too, and he carries that power even when gas. Like he still hits hard. He can still, he still fights when he's tired.
Yeah.
So. I think there's I'm willing to take the chance on him here too. Let's see, odds on this fight are very close. Chagas is the favorite, although really wild. These are some wild lines. Chagas is the favorite minus 130 or 145 to plus 125, and Erick Silva, the underdog, plus 118 to minus 160. So you can actually get Erick Silva as a bigger favorite than Chagas, and Chagas as a bigger underdog than Silva, while in general, almost all the lines have Chagas favored and have Silva as the underdog.
Yeah, if you're a member of the Sports International's betting book, I would definitely go with Chagas at plus 125.
And Erick Silva at plus 118.
Yeah, go with them both. Sportbet and Sports International. If you have memberships with both of those sites, you are in luck.
Yeah, you can get both guys at underdog. Put a bet on both, and you are guaranteed free money unless they draw.
Yeah, basically. Let's see. This one's plus 145 to be under a round and a half. I think minus 165 to go over a round and a half is actually not bad. Erick Silva, he may have been knocked out a lot in his recent fights, but he's never been just like blown out of the water in the first round because that's when he's at his best. And the one Chagas is really tough. I think that may be the best bet on this fight.
Is what?
It's for it to go over a round and a half.
Yeah, I can see that because that's definitely – it doesn't feel likely, but
minus 165 isn't great, but I think both guys are durable enough, and neither guy is quite smooth enough to like definitively finish the opponent with ease in the early going of the fight.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the flip side of that is if Erick Silva does win, it's because he choked him out in the first round.
That's true, but that's typically against people who desperately try to take him down.
This is also true.
Like that's the one thing, by the way, that Erick Silva's really good at. His counter wrestling jiu-jitsu is excellent. Like there is nothing to fault in his fight with Jason High. That's a very solid fighter, and he just easily submitted him because he went for a takedown. Same with the Charlie Brenneman fight, the Koscheck fight. Like that's a dangerous thing, but that's not Chagas' game. So,
all right, that brings us to a flyweight bout: Jussier Formiga versus Dustin Ortiz.
I really like this fight. I think every time a flyweight fight comes up, it seems that I'm reminded that this division is not really shallow in the way that people think it is. It's shallow in that it doesn't have a lot of fighters, but the water that is in this division is very choppy. There are some serious talent packed into the small roster here, and this is a great example of that. Like Jussier Formiga, I think is really coming into his own as a fighter. A little late in his career, perhaps, and then we've got Dustin Ortiz, who is much younger and this kind of awkward, well-rounded guy with a wrestling background. I think this is a really fun matchup. The one thing that has shocked me with either of these fighters in recent memory was Dustin Ortiz's last fight against Wilson Hayes. He was dominated on the ground and in the wrestling, and I didn't really expect that.
And in the boxing.
Yeah, he was kind of dominated all around, but Dustin Ortiz is never a great boxer. It's more like he throws a lot of volume and moves a lot and threatens you with takedowns. So like the punches are an adequate piece of that whole puzzle.
Yeah, I just didn't expect it from Wilson Hayes. I mean, Wilson Hayes is a very, like, he hits with power, but Wilson Hayes has tended to be the kind of power striker who gets himself hurt when he exchanges.
As he did against Jussier Formiga. He got hit by Formiga, who has really become a much better striker and very recently has become a really solid counterpuncher. And so, knowing that Dustin Ortiz's game is maybe, like a lot of flyweights, maybe built on his speed and his ability to transition really well, that's gonna change the way I predict his fights going forward against guys who seem like they can probably shut him out in one of those phases. And Formiga's really hard to take down, and you're not going to out-grapple him. Like, you are not going to out-grapple Jussier Formiga. In fact, he's a really consistent back-take artist in this division, despite having very few takedowns, because he's so damn good, he will just clamber onto your back in the clinch or in a scramble. And I don't think Dustin Ortiz has that level of grappling ability. And then on the feet, like Ortiz he throws more than Formiga, and that's for damn sure. Formiga is very, very tentative sometimes. But Formiga is probably a little more powerful, a little cleaner with his striking, and he's a lot less hittable. Ortiz is definitely hittable. And so I think like cautious striking that lands clean with far superior grappling and excellent defensive wrestling, I think I'm going to go with Formiga. I could see Ortiz winning this one on volume, but I think if he comes forward more, Formiga's going to hit him more. I think Formiga's style is built so that the harder you press him, if you keep coming after him, the more he's going to throw back at you.
Yeah, I like Formiga here too. I think it actually, I'm not sure if it's necessarily you can shut Dustin Ortiz out in one area. I think it's if you can shut him out in one area and really compete with him in another, then it really limits him. Like if you can shut out his grappling and then make it a competitive striking match, he's going to have a lot of trouble. Or if you can shut down his striking and make it a competitive grappling match, he's going to struggle. And
that's the classic problem of the transition specialist is like not having the initiative, not being able to decide where the fight goes because the other guy's defending well enough. When he gets to decide where it goes, when he gets to press his specific advantage, your well-roundedness becomes a weakness.
Yeah, and Ortiz, like the thing I thought of him as a reasonably functional striker at flyweight.
I think he still is. It just has to be in the right kind of matchup.
Yeah, but that Hayes fight opened some eyes for me because he got almost nothing done against Hayes. And Hayes, to his credit, looked a lot better than ever before as a boxer and has continued to look like a better boxer than before. But, Ortiz just had nothing for him. Really, like, didn't hurt him, didn't trouble him, didn't make him think about boxing at all. I mean, even Hector Sandoval made Wilson Hayes think about whether or not he should keep striking. And if Formiga isn't worried about that, and his striking has gotten better to the point that I don't think he has to be that worried about it, then he can force this into a grappling match consistently. And once he does that, I got to think he's got the advantage.
What is it with Rufus Sport fighters and their boxing? Like, they should be better than that, right? They should be pretty good boxers. But for some reason, like, the only guys there who I think are really pretty solid boxers are, like, I think Sergio's a pretty good boxer. And I think, who's our guy who got cut from the UFC? And Chico Camus.
Oh, Chico Camus, yeah.
He's a pretty good boxer. But for the most part, like, there's a lot of stiffness and not very good footwork. Dustin Ortiz is like, it's just not that good. It should be better.
It should.
The volume helps, but it's like all these Rufus Sport guys have a shortcut. Boxing seem effective. And when you take that, like Pettis has accuracy and power, Dustin Ortiz has volume. But, like, if you can negate those things, it's like, holy shit, this guy can't box. You know?
Yeah, it's one of the things, it feels like it should be better, especially because it's something that, like, it looked nearly as functional as it is now back when he was fighting Ian McCall, like in 2010, in 2011.
Yeah.
Like, it's improved since then, but it hasn't improved a lot.
Well, has Anthony Pettis' striking improved in the last 5 years? Like, people thought he looked better at featherweight. I thought he looked worse because he looked the same with a worse gas tank. So, like, he's still naturally very talented and has a good base skill set, but the same holes were there. And I think that may be the thing with Rufus Sport fighters. It's a sad truth.
Yeah, I was actually kind of really pretty surprised at how competitive standing Charles Oliveira was with Pettis, considering how just, Oliveira still just marches forward with his head on line in the same wooden sort of form.
The least sophisticated pressure that Pettis has had to face yet, and it was still a problem.
It was still a problem, yeah. So, odds on this fight, Dustin Ortiz is the underdog plus 175 to plus 150. Jussier Formiga minus 189 to minus 220. No argument there from me.
Feels all right.
Yeah. That brings us to a bantamweight fight and a weird one. Rani Yahya versus Michinori Tanaka. It's weird really just because of Rani Yahya. Rani Yahya is a weird dude, a weird fighter. I had to watch him fight again just to try and regather an idea of what this fight might be like. And, man, I do not think he's going to win this.
Yeah, it's a tough one for him.
Watching him fight Matthew Lopez reminded me a lot of the kind of things that Michinori Tanaka can do, only not as natural an athlete, not as just because Tanaka is really a pretty outstandingly fast athlete. Like, you watch him when he decides to pull the trigger on something, and he moves at lightning speeds. And watching Rani Yahya go for a trip takedown on Matthew Lopez only to end up on his back and like almost getting choked. It's just like I'm pretty sure Tanaka is going to be able to do more with that. That Tanaka does not have the cleanest, most well-connected game. He especially has trouble connecting his striking with his boxing. Like when he only focuses on his boxing, it's not bad. He's got fast enough hands that he can be a decent counterpuncher. But he tends to get kind of tracked in on one or the other and has problems switching gears from one to the other. He can be taken down if he's only focused on his boxing, and if he's only focused on his wrestling, he can be boxed up a bit. But Rani Yahya, he can clubber you from range, and then it's body lock, looking for the trip, and then he'll just make whatever fight he gets a complete slog. And it's good enough to beat some people. It's good enough to beat a lot of people. But a lot of the people that it beats tend to be really kind of underwhelming athletes. I mean, no shame to Matthew Lopez, who I think is just really raw. Frankly, I don't think Matthew Lopez is like a really underwhelming athlete. He's just raw. But Masahiro Nori Kanehara, Johnny Bedford, Josh Clopton, even Mizuto Hirota, like these dudes do not stand out for their extreme athletic ability.
Don't say that about Mizuto Hirota, Zane.
I do love Pugness.
He did beat Mike Brown back in 2011.
He did beat and that's 2011 Mike Brown. I mean, how many times more did Mike Brown fight after that?
His record used to have a lot of solid names on it.
Yeah.
Like Mark Hominick, Eddie Wineland, and Mike Brown. Even Josh Grisby back in 2012. Those are some solid names.
He definitely has had he has been competitive for a long time, and he's always better than you think he will be.
Yes.
That's kind of the big thing, is that he's so often like, you'll see him in a fight like Tom Ninamaki, where he just got like nothing done in that fight at all and loses, and you're just like, he's, Rani Yahya is just not good at all. He's just trash. And then you see him in the next fight and against somebody like Johnny Bedford or something, and he will look bad, and then he won't look way better, but he'll still easily win. And so I think at this point Yahya or Tanaka is too much on the rise, is figuring things out well enough that the mistakes Yahya makes, he won't just be able to power through them on guts and doggedness in the way that he can against other less athletic fighters.
Some interesting notes about Rani Yahya. His team is called Constrictor Team, which is very appropriate because 14 of his 17 submission wins have come via choke. But, okay, so here's the thing. This feels like a fight where Michinori Tanaka should easily win. And the thing is, you always have to say in your head, like, it's Rani Yahya, don't count him out. And that was the thing. I picked Matt Lopez over Rani Yahya. It felt like a fight that I should have picked in the first round. But by the third round, Rani Yahya was still there. And he was still a, second-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And a good one, by the way, with some world championships. He was still there, and that submission ability will last. Like, I think Rani Yahya would be really good if bantamweight had unlimited time limit fights, because even though his stamina is not that great,
it's really not.
No, it's pretty bad actually. His skills and his relentlessness hold up. He will keep pushing, and he will always be dangerous with the submissions, no matter how tired he gets. He has that much craft on the ground, and so if he can push a fight like the Masanori Kanehara fight, he has a pretty good chance of taking a similar decision over Michinori Tanaka, because he maybe didn't deserve to win that fight, and he didn't get a lot done, but he just kept going for takedowns over and over and over again. And if he can have a fight like the Matthew Lopez fight where a lot of it is spent on the ground, then his chances are really solid. But most likely he can't. Like Michinori Tanaka is a really promising prospect. He has gas tank issues of his own, and that's why I have to. That's the main reason I have to count Yahya in, because Yahya's gas tank is a much bigger problem if your gas tank holds up. If you're both tired, then like I said, Yahya's skills are still going to be there late in the fight. But Tanaka's solid. He's got, he's basically a Japanese Uriah Faber. His skill set's very much like Uriah's, and there are some holes there. A lot of these like big obvious movements from outside and stuff like that. But you know, Uriah Faber is really good too, and that's a really good base skill set to have as a prospect. Being able to strike well with good timing and power, with single shots, if not excellent combinations, having a good wrestling game, being very defensively savvy on the ground, and also having some ground and pound and submission skills of your own. Like, I think he can survive with Yahya so long as he's not completely gassed. And I actually thought his striking looked pretty good in that Joe Soto fight until he started to tire. You know, I expected Soto to have a little more hay with the boxing in that fight than he did. So I'm going Michinori Tanaka. Love Yahya. You know I love me like some scrappy old men. And I was only 32, but he sure looks like an old man.
Yeah, I'm 32. I'm Ronnie Yahya.
You did. And this is not even a compliment to you. You look much better than Yahya.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's barely a compliment. So
it is really not a compliment.
Yahya looks like he's older than Francisco Trinaldo, who's 38. I don't know how that's possible. So, but it's Michinori Tanaka is the educated pick, but that little journeyman tingle in my gut always says, like, don't count Yahya out.
Yeah, Yahya is in fact the favorite here, minus 131 to minus 150. Tanaka, the underdog, plus 123 to plus 110. I get it. I think that Tanaka will win, but I'm not saying like, oh, put an underdog bet on Tanaka now that he's at plus odds. Because
hold on, I'm just putting an underdog bet on Tanaka real quick.
Okay. Are you?
I would have bet on him as a very slight favorite. So
okay.
Any underdog odds, I think he's got, like, stylistically, I think he's got a really solid chance of winning.
He's got the right matchup. I think it should favor him. I think he should be the favorite. But Yahya just makes such a career out of winning fights that he shouldn't.
Sure.
And it's really, knowing that, it's such a, like, I don't know, Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't bet, so this is why I don't bet. I have fear in my heart.
I do bet, and I don't do that well. So,
yeah. All right. That brings us to the prelim main event, Gilbert Burns versus Michel Prazeres. And, take it away.
I really like this fight. I mean, I guess like a lot of fights in this card, I find this one to be very uniquely compelling. I'm quite invested in the development of Gilbert Burns, more so now because we just talked to him on Heavy Hands, and he was like just delightful to talk to. Very funny, insightful, seems to really have his head together. The problem with Gilbert so far in his MMA career has been that he just doesn't quite look like a mixed martial artist yet. He looks, I know from having talked to him that he is very committed to striking. And you see that in a lot of his fights. He wants to strike with his opponents. He wants to not only get better in that phase, but he wants to have become the kind of fighter who can win the fight anywhere. He's very dedicated to being well-rounded. But at the same time, I don't think he's super comfortable doing it. Like, he's driven to strike, but when the other striker's really good, or even just solid and pretty clever, he can look uncomfortable in those exchanges. I expect that to get better with time. It's really easy to forget that Gilbert's only been fighting for 4.5 years professionally. He spent a long time perfecting his jiu-jitsu game before ever stepping foot in the cage. But for now, the striking remains somewhat of a liability, both because
I would say it has gotten better. I mean, he
sure, yeah.
Lucas Sayevsky.
I agree. Yeah, I thought, and I meant to say that it looked a lot better in his most recent fight, especially, and that win means more because he was just dominated by Rashid Magomedov. That kind of fight could destroy the confidence of some prospects to have to fight cross such a huge gulf of experience and technique so early. And it didn't. He looked really good against Sayevsky, who I think is a really underrated fighter, who's, I think, a very solid fighter himself. And then we got Michel Prazeres, who is like the sneaky good fighter. He's kind of like Francisco Trinaldo, who's fighting further on the card, not just because he's built like a fire hydrant, but because his game isn't all that pretty, but it's effective in a lot of ways you don't necessarily think it should be.
It's also gotten better, unexpectedly better. Like I did not expect.
His game was on point against JC Cottrell. He's always had good entries into the clinch, but he has never had that good of a level change, reactive double leg game, and it was really, really excellent. Granted, Cottrell was giving up takedowns really easily, but I mean, there was nothing that some much better fighters could have done to stop those takedowns the way they were set up. So I would like to see a grappling battle here, and I hope that we will at some point. We probably will. But I think Gilbert Burns' youth and slowly but steadily improving striking are going to be his edge here, because he's a bigger guy in terms of length. His frame is larger. He is definitely a smoother, more technical striker. Prazeres is maybe a little grittier and craftier with a very basic skill set, but Burns knows how to do more things. And I think that is going to be in his favor here. I think probably he will win a large portion of this fight on the feet, and rather than having to grapple with Prazeres on the ground. And I think he'll like that because he wants to beat people up. So I'm going with Burns by decision though, because I think Prazeres is tough.
I'm actually I'll start out with my pick, which is that I'm taking Burns by submission. And I think the big reason being that at some point, one of them is going to press this fight enough on the feet that they will hurt the other. And when that happens, both men are willing enough to wrestle that it's going to end up on the ground.
Yeah.
And when it does, I don't think Prazeres can actually hang with Burns, because Prazeres he's not big, and he's not actually built the right way to grapple the way he wants to grapple. Like, he wants to be this very lockdown position and then aggressive submission grappler. Like, I'm going to move to a position and then I'm going to go for the submission immediately. It's like, you're kind of a tiny bowling ball. And so the moment you actually jump on a position for that submission, the other guy just sweeps you, because your center of gravity is not spread out enough. Like, you're just a little too turnable. Because his game for a long time was big overhand to power double straight into mount, and he could just hit that super fluidly. And he's gotten better at it. And that's a good position. Side control mount when you're stocky and heavy and concentrated, then you can hold a position. But the scrambling, I think, is more difficult to gain control over someone who's constantly moving underneath you. And you'll notice, as his career has gone on, Prazeres has not gotten any submissions. Yeah. Like, as he has faced better competition, despite his ability to get a lot of advantageous positions, he doesn't keep them. He gets flipped. He gets swept. Guys stand up. They're able to just shuck him because he's only 5'6", you know? And so I think Burns, if Burns has the ability to sweep him, if Burns has the ability to out-scramble him on the ground, he's going to submit him. So that's the big reason I'm picking Burns by submission. Otherwise, I think Burns also has the striking. He hasn't, his striking is improved enough. Prazeres hits with power, but he doesn't have the consistency to be a knockout artist. He can't afford to throw often enough to knock people out, basically. If he does though, like, sense that he's behind and goes nuts like he did in the third round against JC Cottrell, that could trouble a guy like Burns. He could lose his nerve. He might. But I think the big thing that I'm expecting is that because Burns is gaining a lot more trust in his striking, even if he's not as even if his striking is not as smooth or quite as natural as Prazeres is at this point, he may be able to just push a pace that wears Prazeres out. Like, he may be able to outpace Prazeres to force Prazeres to fight in a way that gasses him.
Mm-hmm.
And either way, I think it favors Burns, because Prazeres at this level, he's just not a finisher. And Gilbert Burns is. Prazeres has become a better fighter, and he hits hard, and he can get dominant positions, but he does not have the right tools to finish fights. And
I think there have been no more than 10 takedowns or 10 arm bars in the UFC since the start of like 2015, and Gilbert Burns has 3 of them.
Yeah.
So he's a dangerous guy on the ground.
So I think at some point, whether Prazeres counters Burns and hurts him and Burns shoots in, or whether Burns' pressure forces Prazeres to abandon his striking and shoot a double, sooner or later this hits the ground, and when it does, I expect Prazeres to be giving up positions and Burns to be finding submissions.
Sure.
Odds on this fight, Burns is the favorite, minus 163 to minus 195. Prazeres, the underdog, plus 164 to plus 135. So I actually kind of think Gilbert Burns may even be worth a bet at minus 163. Like, I really think he's got this fight.
Mm-hmm.
Prazeres could beat him, but it's like I say, Prazeres just isn't a finisher. And I don't think not finishing Burns, I don't think he can just keep this a range kickboxing battle in the way that Rashid Magomedov was able to do.
Definitely not, yeah.
That just keeps Burns from ever gaining advantage.
He's going to be a lot more like Sayevsky, like waiting on the counter and allowing Gilbert to kind of time him and hit him. Yeah. Magomedov never gave Gilbert a chance to set up his range.
No.
But a stationary fighter like Prazeres definitely will.
All right, and that moves us forward to a featherweight bout, Godofredo Pepey versus Mike De La Torre. And this should be a bananas brawl. Basically.
I didn't mean to be yawning as you said that.
Yeah, no. This is one of those fights, like, you'll never convince a casual fan to be excited about Godofredo Pepey versus Mike De La Torre.
No.
But if you're a hardcore fight fan, this should only mean one thing for you, and that is a completely nuts, all-out, weird-ass fight that should be fun from start to finish. Because Pepey he's aggressive to a fault with everything.
Yep.
And it's gotten him some amazing wins. Flying triangle choke over Andre Fili, triangle armbar over Deshaun Johnson. I believe that was one where he knocked out and submitted Deshaun Johnson like at the same time, if I'm remembering correctly, where it's like elbows from the guard to his head while cranking the armbar.
I think you're right.
It was like about as definitively as you can ever beat somebody in a fight.
Mm-hmm. Flying knee to Noad Lahat.
Yep, flying knee to Noad Lahat. But he's also the kind of fighter against Darren Elkins. Like, Elkins just shut him down and made Pepey, made Pepey fight an ugly, exhausting fight that Pepey could not keep up. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, you have Mike De La Torre, who, my read on De La Torre is that he's probably a complete fighter. He's not a very well-known fighter, but he's already 30. He's been fighting for almost 10 years now. Well, 10 years almost exactly now. Mm-hmm. And everything he does with power. And so the connecting parts of his game aren't really all that existent. They're not all that noticeable. But he's a power wrestler. He is a power striker. He is a power grappler. He will any opportunity he can, he will try to jump on it and make something happen right away, as quickly as possible. And it makes him a super fun fighter to watch. That fight he had with Yui Chil Nam was absolutely bananas. Because Yui Chil Nam is very much the same kind of fighter as Mike De La Torre. And Godofredo Pepey is kind of the same kind of fighter too, except with Godofredo Pepey, it's not so much power as it is just raw speed and aggression. I don't, I kind of have to pick Pepey here. De La Torre is going to hit him really hard and consistently and really go after him. But Pepe's the kind of dude where if you can't stay safe, he will put you in a lot of danger. And the other side of that is that Sam Cecilia beat him, knocked him out.
Right.
Phillipe Arantes. And
Hani Jason.
Yeah, Hani Jason beat him, yeah. So, and all those fighters are about the same level as Mike De La Torre. They are. But so's Andre Fili,
That's why this fight is great, and also, in my opinion, probably the hardest one on the card to call.
Yeah, I think that Pepey has improved steadily since those Hani Jason, Phillipe Arantes, Sam Cecilia losses. I don't think his process will ever be any better or any different than it is. But his aggressive chain grappling has become more polished and more trustworthy. Like in that Elkins fight, that was a tough fight for Elkins. It was a close, difficult fight, and Pepey had something to offer at every point in it. Mm-hmm. And I think if he fights that way against Mike De La Torre is going to give him more options than Darren Elkins did. De La Torre also is a much better finisher, a much more dangerous fighter. So the options that Pepey gives him are going to mean a lot more and could end up being more damaging. But right now, I just have a little more trust in Pepe's slick, submission-focused game than I do De La Torre's everything-focused power game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one thing sure, Pepey is almost certainly not going to get De La Torre down with a takedown. And so when the grappling happens, De La Torre has very, very good defensive wrestling. He's very strong in the clinch. I don't know if he's actually been taken down in the UFC yet. I think he maybe was taken down briefly a few times in a few fights, but has always sprung right back to his feet. And so Pepey is not a great offensive wrestler, so that's not going to happen. So really, if it goes to the ground, it's going to be Pepey on the bottom because he totally loves to pull guard. He's one of the few guys crazy enough to try that, and one of the few guys good enough to make it work and aggressive enough to make it work.
It doesn't really matter that Pepey's not going to get takedowns.
Right. So I still wonder if he can actually effectively pull De La Torre into his guard and if De La Torre will stay there. I think De La Torre he's a well-trained fighter. He's pretty smart and pretty cautious. The one thing that really worries me here for De La Torre's sake is looking at that fight with Brian Ortega, because that is exactly the kind of thing that Godofredo Pepey can do. I don't think he's quite as consistent, maybe not quite as like savvy as a mixed martial artist as Brian Ortega with how he sets up his submissions.
But he's not as tough. That's like the biggest thing. Ortega can take a shit kicking for 3 rounds and then pull out a miracle.
That's true. Yeah, but and that's the thing is that Pepey is both more vulnerable than a guy like Ortega because of the way he attacks and less durable. Yeah. And Mike De La Torre has a mean left hook. So I don't know. Like, you have a guy who's going to throw heat on the counter and a guy who's going to recklessly expose himself, but constantly attack the guy who's waiting for him to attack. And so both guys are going to get their chances. I'm going to go with De La Torre because I like him and I've liked him since his UFC debut. That Brian Ortega fight, it is clearly a fight that Pepey could win. I think it's the hardest one to call on the card. So in the end, it's kind of just a coin flip for me. And I'm going to say that De La Torre clips Pepey coming in and TKOs him.
All things are likely. This is not a fight. I expect this to just be a bananas awesome fight for however long it lasts because neither guy, I don't expect either guy to back down or respect the other one even a little.
Pepey is just not a good boxer. No. He was being handily outstruck by Noad Lahat before, but before flying kneeing his head through the rafters. That's the thing. It's like
Yeah.
he doesn't need to be a good boxer to still be sometimes very effective.
He is sort of, he's a slightly less athletic and obviously much more grappling focused version of Yair Rodriguez, where like you see these very obvious problems, and it so often it just doesn't matter. It's just like, well, when you can fight with that kind of aggression and output and rob like blinding speed, you can just get away with a lot of bad shit.
Sure. Yeah.
You know? The odds on this fight, Pepey is the favorite, minus 134 to minus 150. I say that like it's a surprise, or minus 165. I say it's like it's a surprise, but Torre is really unknown to most fans. Torre, the underdog, plus 135 to plus 110. And I gotta think Torre is worth a little bit of a chance bet. Let's see. Or fight starts round 3. That's minus. Fight won't start round 3 is minus 186. That's not really worth much. Torre by TKO KO is plus 250.
If he's going to win, it's probably going to be a stoppage, you know?
Yeah. And I don't think he's going to submit Pepey. I think he's going to knock him out. So,
yeah.
Torre via KO at plus 250, maybe.
Maybe. It's a very tough fight to bet, man. Like, just having any idea what's going to happen is very hard.
It really is. It's a weird, tough fight because Torre's had a couple of flash losses in the UFC. Not just the Ortega one, but the Maximo Blanco one too. And I know everybody says that that was waved off too quickly, but it's also a case of Torre getting caught right out of the gate by a fighter who's going to do exactly the same kind of stuff that Pepey's going to do.
True.
You know? So.
Was Maximo Blanco's last loss not the ideal Maximo Blanco loss, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, God, yes. That made me so happy.
The fastest submission in UFC featherweight history.
Leaping big leg front kick.
Oh, double flying kicks.
Anaconda.
Oh,
like
Maximo.
A big leg off the top rope to Anaconda in the UFC.
And it happened to Maximo Blanco because who the hell else would that happen to?
Yep. All right, that brings us to a middleweight bout, Thiago Santos versus Erick Spicely. Describe this fight in 15 seconds or less. Yeah,
it's not worth a lot of analysis. It's a get-over fight or a comeback fight for Thiago Santos. It's a tune-up. Erick Spicely has basically no skills as a mixed martial artist aside from his submission grappling. He has a surprisingly good record despite that, but you're not going to take Thiago Santos down. You're going to get beaten up by him in the clinch, and you're going to get owned at range. That is not a good situation to find oneself in. It's Thiago Santos, I think probably by first round TKO.
Yeah, head kick KO maybe.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Santos is big and mean and has learned to defend takedowns, and he couldn't beat Gegard Mousasi, but that's Gegard Mousasi. And Erick Spicely is not Gegard Mousasi.
No, he is not.
So, yeah, this is going to – who was Erick Spicely's first UFC fight?
Sam Alvey. He got submitted by Sam Alvey.
So, this is going to look a lot like that, except it's going to take less time and it's going to be against somebody a lot faster than Sam Alvey.
Someone like Sam Alvey made Erick Spicely. Like, Erick Spicely made Sam Alvey look like an athlete. Yeah. That's not that's nobody else has really done that. Sam Alvey does not look that athletic. And Thiago Santos genuinely looks like a linebacker. It's not going to go well.
No. Thiago Santos is a favorite, minus 455 to minus 650. Spicely, the underdog, plus 472 to plus 350. Plus 320. Worth a bet on Santos?
Maybe. What's Santos by KO?
Santos by KO.
Minus 245 is really not bad.
Yeah.
Just considering this fight. Like, I know that makes it very specific, but...
Yeah, minus 2. Or let's see. fight starts round 2 is plus 170. That actually seems like
maybe, yeah.
That actually, I don't know. Like
it's yeah. I think the odds makers know, as we do, that Erick Spicely is being sacrificed here. So
yeah, I feel bad for the dude, but that's the way it is.
Mm.
That brings us to a lightweight bout: Francisco Trinaldo versus Paul Felder. This is a good fight, and it's a kind of key turning point for Paul Felder a bit. I think, like, it's unfortunate that Paul Felder really has introduced himself as a top lightweight from day one and then had to fight to those expectations ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not a top lightweight. He's a good action fighter. He's a good mid-tier UFC lightweight, but
he's looked for a long time like a potentially top 10 lightweight.
Yeah. The big thing is that if you can, like, if you force Felder to work hard, he kind of has trouble. Like, if you force him to pick it, to try and chase you down and try and really make the fight happen, he has trouble. And if you can really challenge him anywhere, he really has trouble. Like, he hits hard. He is willing to be aggressive. He's tough as hell. He will wade in. He's big. He's mean. He's got all of these raw tools that make up a good fighter. But
he's pretty technical too.
Yeah, he's pretty technical too. He's sort of a plus version of Brandon Thatch. It's Brandon Thatch 2.0. Big, mean, technical, actually tough, actually decently well-rounded, or, not badly well-rounded. I think Francisco Trinaldo is just another one of the guys that beats him. Because Trinaldo has really actually figured out how to fight at a consistently high level. And to fight well in hard fights. Like, that Yancy Medeiros fight, Medeiros had something to offer him. He was working on trying to offer something back. And Trinaldo just absolutely schooled him. And, I can't even say that of, like, Felder-Berkman. Felder beat Berkman, but it wasn't, like, an amazing win. It was just sort of like Berkman did his normal, I'll drift through this fight not really doing anything, and I guess I lost it. But when Berkman actually, like, dipped in and tried to hit Felder, he had a little success with it.
Definitely.
And I feel like Trinaldo, his style of pressure fighting is just become really effective. As time goes on, he's become more polished. He's become better at doing everything right and doing everything consistently right. So I don't have the deep technical analysis that you may offer this, but I feel like this is just another step too far for Felder, and it's going to play into a lot of the same problems we've seen him have with guys like Ross Pearson and guys like Edson Barboza.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at this fight from the perspective of, like, as you said, the technical perspective of who throws a better straight right, who's got a quicker jab, who has better head movement, like, it's Paul Felder pretty much all the way. But if you look at it basically from the angle you just looked at it, you just say who's the better fighter. It's kind of Francisco Trinaldo. There's just something missing from Paul Felder. I think he has a little bit too high of standard of what openings he will attack. He's a little too willing to sit back and wait. And then he ends up frustrating himself because of it, because he's not getting enough done and he's getting picked apart by the guy who's just willing to just touch you whenever he gets an opening with something like risk-free. So he kind of overaims himself a little bit. Like, Overeem used to bully the hell out of you, which would make him gas, And then because he's a bully, he would lose it entirely. And Paul Felder waits for you to lead, and because he's waiting, he gets outstruck, and then he loses his cool. And Trinaldo's not as bad technically as I think a lot of people would say he is, but really his strongest suit here is that he is learning how to win rounds better than Paul Felder. He knows when to press and when to pull back. He knows when to move to give himself some rest. He knows when to walk his opponent into counters. He knows when to mix up his strikes. Like, he just kind of knows how to make himself fairly unpredictable. And despite being 38 years old, he's still pretty damn fast, still light on his feet, and he hits hard. So I'm going with Francisco Trinaldo too. I like Ross Pearson a lot. I would love to see him win this fight.
Paul Felder, you mean? Paul
Felder, sorry, yeah. And I would say that more strongly if I didn't also really like Francisco Trinaldo. But like Paul Felder getting over, it would be great. But he's 32. He doesn't have much experience, but you got to wonder. I mean, I guess that sounds crazy saying that in a matchup with the guy who's 38 years old.
It is crazy. Like, I think Felder can keep getting better. The problem is just that after that win over Danny Castillo, the UFC really kind of overrated him off that win. I mean,
I think I overrated him too. I think a lot of us did.
Yeah, a lot of people did. I mean, they said, okay, fight Edson Barboza, and he just lost that fight.
If you give him more guys who are like one-dimensional wrestlers, I think he would destroy them. Yeah. I think his game is really well suited to that. But when you stick him in these matchups with aggressive, willing, durable strikers, or just smarter strikers, then the holes in his game start to show.
He just seems like a fighter who continually runs out of ideas if you don't go away. Like, if he can't just make you go away from something big and flashy or make you absolutely fear him, then he just runs low on ideas of how to actually approach the fight.
I would say the best thing about his last two fights is that they were both kind of comebacks. Which you don't want to have a tendency for comebacks, but he really looked early in his career like he couldn't come back. Like, once the other guy figured out how to beat him, they were going to beat him. So that's pretty good. He's a little more willing to adjust. He's learned some from that experience. I just don't know if it's enough at this point for Trinaldo. It certainly could be. Like, I think this is a really close fight, but and Trinaldo, it's not like I said. Like, Trinaldo's, he's hittable. He's really wild. Like, there's all this stuff. But when it comes to just like winning rounds and knowing when and how to do the right things, I think he's got it in the bag.
Yeah, he's also been amazingly durable to this point.
Oh, yeah. He's awesome, man. He's 38 years old, and he's on a 6-fight winning streak, and he's been destroying a lot of those opponents. He's awesome. Yeah. How can you not root for him?
Yeah. Odds on this fight, Felder is a close underdog, plus 120 to plus 105. Trinaldo, a slight favorite, minus 124 to minus 145. I think that's absolutely appropriate and where it should be. Felder does hit hard enough. He does have enough fluidity and technique to his game that he can absolutely connect and hurt a fighter like Trinaldo, who is going to be aggressive, or who's gonna come after him and who's gonna put hands on him. But Felder is also he's not quite trustable to be a favorite in these kind of fights. He's like he's a prototypical action fighter in that you give him the right matchup, he'll win. You give him the wrong matchup, he'll lose. And he'll be fun either way, but he's just not winning tough fights.
Yeah. He's not adjusting the way that an elite fighter needs to beat the ones that aren't ideal for his style.
Yeah. So that brings us to a heavyweight bout between Roy Nelson and Antonio Silva.
This one doesn't deserve a lot of analysis, Zane, so I will make it quick. Heavyweight has different standards than other divisions, And one of the things that becomes more important the bigger you get is durability. Roy Nelson still has it, and Antonio Bigfoot Silva does not. Both guys hit hard, but Nelson's the first-round knockout guy. If that doesn't happen, this is Bigfoot's fight to lose. It will rapidly become that way because he's more well-rounded, more willing to use his grappling, better striking arsenal. But the man just cannot take a punch anymore, you know. And worse, Roy Nelson looked pretty good in that Josh Barnett fight as far as stamina is concerned. So it's not like, and he used to be lauded for having better stamina than you thought he did. So it's not like you can just expect him to be completely useless after the first round every time. It's Roy Nelson by first round knockout. That's my pick.
Yeah, he survived 15 minutes with Derek Lewis and was still like standing. And we saw, and people arguably said he won that fight. We saw how hard Derek Lewis hit him.
The only consolation Bigfoot has here is that his long-term health will probably be better than Roy's because science tends to show that being knocked out is better for you than taking a bunch of repeated punishment. And I think I actually have some numbers here. Roy Nelson has taken 836 significant strikes in his UFC career. That's 49 per fight on average, 4.62 per minute. But he's only been knocked out in all that time by Mark Hunt. Like, Junior Dos Santos couldn't knock him out. Alistair Overeem couldn't knock him out. Daniel Cormier couldn't knock him out. He's just really, really fucking tough despite being incredibly hittable. The guy can take a punch, and that is the one thing that is most obviously missing from Bigfoot's career in the last few years.
In the Struve fight, I said that Struve would hit Bigfoot once, and Bigfoot would get knocked out, and that would be the end of the fight. And that was Stefan Struve. Stefan Struve does not hit half as hard as Roy Nelson.
In fairness, he's the only guy to knock out Stipe Miocic, but he doesn't hit as hard as Roy Nelson. That's for sure.
This is just, it's going to be a slaughter. It's going to be a slaughter, especially because Antonio Silva does not get it. He does not understand that this is going on.
He's still slow, he's still hittable, and he still wants to keep fighting. Like, he doesn't seem to.
And I don't even think the length of time of this fight actually favors him in any way, shape, or form. I don't think he can ever be dominant enough in this fight to put Roy Nelson away, and will always, at any point in this fight, be in danger of crumbling up from any one strike.
Yeah.
So
he needs that TRT, man. he needs it.
Yeah, I got Roy Nelson by first round KO. In fact, if this goes longer than a minute, I will actually be a little surprised. No lie. More than a minute, I would be shocked. Roy Nelson minus 400 to minus 490. Antonio Silva plus 373 to plus 300. Maybe people know something I don't know, but that actually feels close. I say, like, I mean, it's not close enough to bet on. I never like to see heavyweight fights more than plus or minus 200, but man, I would be shocked if Antonio Bigfoot Silva won this fight. Like, legitimately, absolutely shocked. And let's see, fight Nelson by KO is minus 290. Over under 1.5 rounds, minus 210. Nelson wins in round 1 is minus 210. Like, that is how skewed these odds are.
I'm going to say the best odds are under 1.5 because you cut out the slim chance that Antonio Silva gets something done, and you account for the fact that Roy Nelson only ever knocks people out in the first round. It's
just, I would be legit shocked if Antonio Silva won this.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocked.
Gobsmacked, even.
Gobsmacked. That brings us to the co-main event, a featherweight fight. Renan Barao, Phillipe Nover, or is it Phillipe? I don't know.
I asked the same question on heavy hands this week. I really don't know.
I'll say Phillipe Nover. Um,
Or is it Nover?
Whatever. I don't give a shit. Um, and is it your turn to? No, it's me. I think. Yeah. Is Renan Barao this bad? Like, this is another case of the Gray Maynard fight picking conundrum. Like, Renan Barao looked bad against Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens is without question the worst loss of Renan Barao's career since Joao Paulo Rodriguez in his first fight ever. Phillipe Nover would be a huge step down. A huge one. I do not think that Barao is going to take that step down. Nover is a little bit too much of a jack of all trades, master of none. Can press an advantage when he has an advantage, but rarely has an actual advantage. Like, when he's a better striker than you, he hits hard. When he's a better wrestler than you, he hits takedowns. When he's a better grappler than you, he can out-grapple you. But in a fight like that Zubara Tukugov fight, when he wasn't actually better at any of those things, he just kind of drifts through a loss. And I see this that's how I see it for here. Like, Barao does not have the ability to soak up the damage he used to soak up. That's pretty obvious. But Nover does not hit. Nover hits hard, but he does not hit with any of the cleanness of technique, consistency of technique, or the raw power to just turn Barao's lights out. And Barao fights incredibly well while injured. Barao has all of the good instincts of a top-level fighter still, of how to fight when injured, of how to stay safe, of how to change a fight while injured to stay in it and keep things working in his direction. Nover would have to either one-punch KO him, which, let's see, when's the last time Nover knocked anyone out? Michael McQuaid in 2005 is the last time Nover knocked anyone out. So Nover would have to one-punch KO him or put on the absolute best performance of his life, and that just does not seem likely. So I got Renan Barao by decision.
I'm going to disagree with one part of your analysis, even though I think everything else is spot on, and that was that you said that Renan Barao looked bad against Jeremy Stephens, and I don't think he did.
Did I say bad? No, I said that it was the worst loss.
You did say he looked bad before that.
Okay. He looked bad once he got hurt. Like, he got hurt, and it was a problem.
The fight didn't go his way, and that was, like, the least accomplished guy that he's lost to.
Yeah.
He's had a few close calls before. He had a really close fight with Cole Escovedo early in his WEC career.
He struggled a little with Mitch Gagnon, frankly. Not a lot, but a little. He
definitely did. And I've said that a couple times now in the past 2 weeks, but I will reiterate. I took a lot more hope away from his loss to Jeremy Stephens than I did from his win to Mitch Gagnon.
Yeah.
Because when he beat Mitch Gagnon, like, that was a guy that the Barao who beat Uriah Faber would have destroyed Mitch Gagnon. Mm-hmm. But the Barao who lost to TJ Dillashaw, or the Barao who unimpressively beat Mitch Gagnon, would have been destroyed by Jeremy Stephens, I think. And he was not. I think, to me, it looked like a bit of a growing pains thing. It looked like Barao said, all right, I'm going to stop with the weight cutting. I'm going to go up a division. What are my advantages against bigger, more powerful people? Well, I'm quick, and I know I've needed to improve my footwork for some time anyway, and I have good, fast hands, so I need to be on the outside, moving in and out, and countering. And he did it really well in the first round. Like, nobody argues that he won the first round against Jeremy Stephens. He stopped doing it in the second round and got hurt, and then he went back to it in the third. Now, not quite well enough to make up the difference, although there were quite a few people who had him winning the fight. It was definitely close.
Yeah.
So I take some hope away from that. Like, I think Jeremy Stephens, being a big featherweight who's really powerful, and I think is probably at his best now, better than he's ever been, that's a more tough matchup than just his accomplishments would suggest. For Barao's first step up in the division after his second crushing loss to TJ Dillashaw. So I am quite invested now in seeing if Barao can continue to improve that new approach. And if he can, he's definitely going to beat Phillipe Nover. And if he can't, he's still probably going to beat Phillipe Nover. So this fight to me is not really fascinating because of who he's fighting, but because it's Barao fighting, and I want to see where he goes from here. I saw potential, and that having seen him lose so badly and then recover what I thought was so well despite the loss, to me that makes him a very compelling fighter to keep following.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like I say, he fights like an elite veteran fighter. He knows how to adjust and to do things on the fly. He's good everywhere. He was able to very distinctly out wrestle Jeremy Stephens when he needed to.
Sure.
And despite being smaller than him, like quite a bit smaller.
He looked very, very small compared to Stephens in that fight. Stephens is a hefty featherweight. That's a big dude. That was like Donald Cerrone fighting Patrick Cote for his first welterweight fight. Like, you're fighting a big welterweight. Yeah,
and so Barao's game, like, he knows how to do a lot of things, and he knows how to do a lot of things well, and he knows how to adjust to do the things that will work for him in the moment when something goes wrong. And I don't see any of that out of Nover. Nover is basically like, what are you going to give me? Okay, I'll take that. If you don't give me anything, I'm just going to sit and watch you.
Yeah.
So
to me, they should give Barao like Gray Maynard after Nover. Like, give him some guys who are big featherweights, who have some things that featherweights are better at than bantamweights, like some wrestling ability. But let him get a couple of wins under his belt so he can feel what it's like to be a successful featherweight. I think he's got
Dennis
potential.
Seaver.
Huh?
Maybe Dennis Seaver.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
Seaver's still around.
And then ultimately on to guys like Dennis Bermudez and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. All right, odds on this. Barao is coming in at -400 to -525. Nover +373 to +300. I definitely think Barao should win this, but it is interesting because I think there are small concerns. Like, Nover shouldn't win it, and he doesn't have the tools to necessarily take Barao out of this, but Barao's chin is a growing concern. So it's an interesting, I don't disagree with the line, but it does give me pause for thought.
Over 2.5 is, on my book, over 2.5 is -145. I don't think that's a terrible bet.
Yeah, I kind of I don't expect Barao to finish him, honestly. Mm-hmm. Nover fights pretty safe when he doesn't have an advantage. Mm-hmm. And Barao is not going to give him an advantage, so he's probably going to fight a very tentative fight.
Yep.
That brings us to the main event, Chris Cyborg, Lina Lansberg.
Lina Lansberg would have some pretty good potential to be a solid mixed martial artist if she had probably started a little sooner and if she wasn't fighting Chris Cyborg. I think she's got the right skills in the right areas to actually make Cyborg work a little bit. Mm-hmm. She's a pretty good striker from range. She's definitely a good striker in the clinch. She's got some solid clinch wrestling as well. And those are things, the range striking and the wrestling are two things that Cyborg is consistently much better at than her opponents. Whether she's going for those high amplitude takedowns that she likes or she's defending takedowns, typically fighters fail when they can't outwork her in the clinch and are forced to strike with her at range. And so that gives Lansberg options. She's also fought some bigger, tougher women before in her Muay Thai career. She fought both Valentina and Antonina Shevchenko. She lost to both of them pretty badly, but she's got a lot of fights and a lot of experience, so that's something for her. And then the only other thing in her corner is that we still don't know for certain what Cyborg looks like making this catch weight, making 140. What does she look like after a round? After 2 rounds. We haven't seen that. We know she looks really good for 2 minutes because she looked phenomenal against Leslie Smith. But Smith, I think, is more hittable and slower than a fighter like Lina Lansberg.
There's nothing to say yet, though, that Lina Lansberg is a better fighter in MMA than Leslie Smith
No.
overall.
No, yeah. But Leslie Smith is the problem for Leslie Smith is she's a fighter in her MMA career who has always gotten by on being really tough and durable, and that's a tough thing to lean on against Cyborg. And Lansberg doesn't rely so much as a mixed martial artist on just taking punches.
No.
So that is a little bit of a stylistic edge, but it's Cyborg, man. She's not only just a ridiculously powerful fighter who is big and a dynamite puncher and kicker. She's really, really solid technically. And she's getting better and better with every fight. I think that's probably the most admirable thing about Cyborg is that she's not a fighter who's willing to rest in her laurels. She has been the most dominant fighter at 145 by a long shot for a very long time. And she has consistently tried to improve. She has done grappling tournaments. She's fought professional kickboxing bouts. She's constantly pushing herself to get better in different areas of her game. And she's working with Jason Perillo, who turned Michael Bisping into a middleweight champion, which, you know, is not the untainted accomplishment it might be for a different fighter. But he also made a really experienced guy, a guy who would probably really set in his ways. He took him and refined him in marked ways.
Yeah, made him noticeably better.
Yeah, much better. He made him a much better striker. And he's done the same things with Cyborg. Like, she's got much better head movement. Her footwork is a lot better. She's very balanced when she punches now. She's got some of that Joe Louis thing going on where you know she's a heavy hitter. So, like, the most important thing is just don't get her past her feet. Make it so that she's always in a position to hit you with one of those punches. And against Leslie Smith, she was never, ever at a loss for what to do. So yeah. I hope that Lina Lansberg can make her work, but it's Chris Cyborg by, I'm going to say, early second round TKO.
Yeah, I think so the first thing with the whole weight cut thing, too, is I do want to stress and we talked about this a little before the show, every fighter's weight cut results look different. Like, you never know how much a weight cut is going to affect someone until you see them in the fight. Because we can see fighters that look skeletal and fucking awful on the scale and then look fine in the cage. And we can see fighters that look fine on the scale and look awful in the cage. Look totally gassed, totally adrenaline dumped, totally out of shape. We've seen fighters that look like they should easily be able to drop a division. Guys like Ross Pearson, who are pretty small lightweights. You know, he's not like the biggest guy in the lightweight division at all, going down to 145 and suddenly look just totally drained out. And we've seen guys that look huge dropping divisions and be totally, totally fine and, you know, fight there for years. You know, guys. And so you really just, you don't know what you're going to get out of somebody's weight cut. And it's one of those X factors that I hate to use as a measuring stick for how a fight's going to go. Because it's not what you're seeing in the ring. Like, you can't judge it as what actually happens in the cage. And classically in the cage, Cyborg's known for putting herself through grueling conditioning and workouts, and we've never seen her look tired or fade or have any kind of problems keeping pace as a fight goes on. I mean, in that Jan Finney fight, like, she had to pour a absolute beating on that woman for, you know, around or late into the second round, fighting at an impossible pace and didn't show any signs of stopping. Like, it was still
4 rounds with Marlos Kunin.
Yeah, 4 rounds with Marlos Kunin, no trouble at all. Like, we've never seen Cyborg be, like, gassed out or have problems where she just can't keep up with somebody. And Lansberg, most of her career is at 135. She's had one fight at 145, one fight at 140. And my biggest problem looking at tape is when she's outside, she tends to be very patient, throwing one strike at a time. She has some power. She's got good technique. But she's going to give Cyborg opportunities to load up and find range and deliver. And when she does rush in, she does it with her head on line, with her chin up high, and on straight lines. Like, she will flurry her way into the clinch, and she's not terrible at it. Compared to a lot of women in that division at 135, she's actually pretty good at closing into the clinch. But it's still head on line, chin up, and just asking to be countered really hard. So, and the other part of that too is Lina Lansberg has not been forced to wrestle very often in her MMA career. And the few times she has been early, her takedown defense has been bad. Like, I think it was one of her Cage Warriors fights. Let's see.
She fought Pani Kianzad in her debut.
Yeah, not Pani Kianzad fight, but Kianzad's pretty good. But Emma Delaney, I think it was. Maybe the Laura Hovarth fight even, but definitely the Delaney fight. Delaney just went in and got a headlock on her and just threw her to the ground without any trouble at all.
Cyborg is no joke on the ground either. She's actually a very good grappler.
You cannot give... I think in the Laura Hovarth fight, Laura Hovarth got her down, had her in guard, and then screwed up and gave her... Lansberg was able to kick out and get a takedown of her own. You can't get put on your back like that against Cyborg. She will not let you survive there. She will not give you time and room to make mistakes like that. So, like, if it were just going to be able to be a pure clinch control battle where they could really, like, exchange time in the clinch standing, I would give Lansberg a chance of really acquitting herself well. But I think the moment she gets into the clinch, Cyborg's just going to ragdoll her. And if she doesn't get into the clinch, Cyborg's going to hit her a lot more and a lot harder. So, I don't know. I'm interested. Lansberg looks like a good addition to 135. I think she can be a decent fighter there. I would be pretty shocked if she had an upset here, even if she is better and more well-rounded and better athlete than a lot of the women that Cyborg has had to fight lately. So, Cyborg, I'm going to say KO round 1, honestly, or TKO round 1.
Sounds fair. Like, as much as my only feeling for Lina Lansberg is like, maybe she can make Cyborg work. Not can she beat Cyborg. The chances they're very, very slim. Yeah.
Odds are Cyborg is a favorite minus 1111. So minus 1,111 to minus 1,400 or 1,500. And Lansberg is the underdog plus 892 to plus 712 or 700. If you are a true believer and you love losing money, she's all the way down to plus 590 even on one book. But if you're a true believer and you love losing money, then a chance bet it on Lina Lansberg at plus 892 is right there for you to waste some money on. But I wouldn't do it.
No.
Any other thoughts on betting for this card?
Not other than the ones I mentioned earlier. I got, I think, let me look over it again. I'm sorry. Hold on. I navigated away. Okay, here we are. I like possibly Vicente Luque as a favorite. I think maybe Alan Patrick is a pretty heavy underdog. I got Luan Chagas as an underdog. And who else did I like? Oh, Michinori Tanaka as a little underdog as well.
All right. Well,
I think that's about it.
There's Connor's surefire ways to make money and be successful in life.
Surefire ways to lose money but have fun doing it. That's what I call it.
Yeah. Do not bet heavily based on what we say, please, for the love of God. Or if you do, don't tell us about it because I don't want to know. And thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at TheseAnytime, and you can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give this video a like. That's a thumbs up. And subscribe to MMANation.com over on YouTube as DOTCOM. That's our YouTube channel. We will be back next week for Fight Night Portland, Lineker versus Dodson, which will be all sorts of fun. And we will have all the normal shows for that. The Care Don't Care, If I Did It, Heavy Hands, all that good stuff. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.